everyone, it's Channin here for Pinkfresh Studio. In today's video, we are going to make this vibrant card with the new Fancy Roses bunch and pair it with a splashy watercolor background. We're going to start with the Fancy Rose Bunch stamp set. It has this really large floral stamp. I'm going to place it on an A2 panel of some heavyweight white cardstock, and I'm going to stamp it in the detail black. Now the detail black is a hybrid ink, so you need to allow it to completely dry before you do any of your ink blending. So I stamped it here and then I set it aside and let it dry. Now that it's dry, I'm ready to move on to the stencils. There are 6 stencils for this Fancy Rose Bunch stencil set, and each stencil is labeled. You can see it's labeled in the upper left corner there. I'm going to align my stencil with my stamped image. Once I get it in place, I'll grab a couple pieces of tape to hold my stencil down so it doesn't shift. And I'm going to start here with Sunshine. This is a beautiful yellow. I'm going to ink blend these flowers here as well as some flower centers with this Sunshine yellow. Then I'm going to move on to Fresh Pear and ink blend any of the leaves that are in this first stencil. Once I finish the leaves, I then have a couple of berries, and I'm going to use passion fruit to ink blend those berries. Once I finish that, I'm ready for stencil number 2. Again, I'm going to line it up and then use a couple pieces of tape to hold the stencil in place. I'm going to start here with Sweet Mustard. This is a little bit darker yellow, and I'm going to ink blend over those yellow flowers with this darker yellow. We're moving on to a more detailed layer for these flowers, so I like to move up in color and use darker colors. Now for these flowers over here, I want them to be orange, and I'm going to start with Apricot. And this is actually going to be my lightest color for these orange flowers. I'm just going to do a quick blend with that apricot, and then I will move on to a pink for the 3 roses in the center. This is bubblegum, and I'm going to use it again for the next layer, so I have to make sure I ink blend these roses right now very lightly with this bubblegum. I don't want to go too dark, too heavy-handed with it. Once I finish with the bubblegum, I'm ready to ink blend the berries again. I'm going back to that passion fruit again, but I'm ink blending much more heavy-handedly, so it's going to have some contrast. It's going to be darker than the layer that preceded. After I ink blend those berries, I am done with stencil number 2, and we're ready for number 3. I'm going to line it up here again, tape it in place, and then I'm going to start with my yellow flowers again, but this time I'm using apricot for them. This is going to be my darkest shade for my yellow flowers, and this orange will really help to get that contrast. Now we're moving on to Clementine for the orange flowers, a darker shade, a darker orange than we used earlier, and just ink blend this detail layer for them. And then we'll move on to bubblegum again for the roses, and now I'm going to ink blend that bubblegum really heavy-handedly so I get a lot of contrast between the first layer of bubblegum and the second. Now we're going to finish up the berries with a new red. This is Berrylicious. Just going to ink blend all those, and then we'll be done with stencil 3. Now we're going to line up stencil 4 here, and once I get it in place, I'll use a couple pieces of tape to hold it down. For stencil 4, we're just going to finish up these flowers. Starting with the orange ones, going to use Clementine here really heavy-handedly to do those orange flowers, and then I'm going to clean my stencil and grab passion fruit, which is a red, is what we used earlier on the berries, and ink blend those orange flowers so I get a combo of an orange and a red, and it will make it get more contrast that way. Just going to quickly finish up the roses here with Raspberry Bliss, and I did the berries one last time in Berrylicious. Now we're moving on to stencil 5, and this is the base layer for the leaves. I'm going to start here with Fresh Pear and ink blend all the leaves with Fresh Pear. I'm actually going to do a combo of greens here for this stencil layer. So starting with that Fresh Pear, once I finish ink blending all the leaves with that Fresh Pear, I'm going to move on to Meadow, which is a darker green, and kind of ink blend a little gradation here. So I'm starting with the Meadow and blending out to starting at the stems and blending out. Now we're moving on to an even darker shade. This is Evergreen, and again kind of ink blending a little gradation here at that darker green. Once I finish with that Evergreen, there's a little bit of berries that I've left where I didn't ink blend with the green, and I just ink blended those quickly with some of the Berrylicious. Now we're ready for the last stencil. I lined that up, going to tape it down, and now this last layer is really simple. I'm just going to ink blend all of the openings here with Evergreen, that darkest green that I just used for stencil 5. And after I finish that Evergreen, my ink blending is done. This looks so pretty, so vibrant. I'm now going to stamp it one more time in the detail black. I love stamping my images after I ink blend them because I find when I ink blend them, I kind of lose the crispness of my outline. So I just stamped it again, and now my black outline is nice and crisp and bold. Now I'm going to die cut this out with the Fancy Rose Bunch die. Just lined it up with the stamp and ran it through my die cutting machine. And now we're going to move on to the background. So I have the Dotted Scallops Coverplate die. I'm going to die cut it over a panel of Bristol paper. Bristol comes in two types of vellum and smooth. I used vellum here, and the brand is Strathmore, and you can see my beautiful die cut panel here. Now I'm going to do some coloring on top of this panel, some really simple coloring with these Tombow dual brush pens. These pens have a water-based ink in them. There are a lot of other water-based markers out there on the market, like Distress Ink or Karen brush tip markers. All of those would work for this technique. I just picked some colors that match the flowers that I colored, and then I quickly scribbled on this panel of Bristol paper. Bristol paper is a really smooth paper, and that's going to allow these inks to really move once I spritz them with water, which you can see I'm doing here, just spraying this panel with water. And then I'm going to grab this Rocket Air Blaster. Now this is a tool actually for cleaning camera lenses, but it just helps to blow the air and allow me to really direct my drips so I can get a really fun drippy streaky look. And it even allows me to kind of control my color mixing a little bit. I don't have ultimate control, but I can kind of stop some of the pinks and the reds from totally mixing with the green a little bit too. I really like using this tool with my watercolors to kind of control a little bit. Even though this is a fun messy look, I want to have a little bit of control still. So that's the panel completely dry. Now we're going to move on to our sentiment. So I have the Happy Smiles stamp set here. I just grabbed a sentiment from that set, inked it up in detail black, and stamped it on some white cardstock. Then I'll grab the matching Heart Smiles die set, die cut my sentiment out, and we're basically ready to pull this card together. I'm going to start by actually lining up my flowers with my watercolor panel, and then I'm going to hold it in place and then trim off any of that excess that hangs out past the card. I really don't like it when there's little bits of pieces of the image hanging out past the card because I think it's hard to get in the envelope. And once I trim that down, I'm going to then adhere my panel down onto an A2 top folding white card base. And then I'm going to take that trimmed floral arrangement and add some foam adhesive to the back side of it. I find it's easier to trim it first and then add the foam adhesive than trying to trim it once you've added the foam adhesive and it's attached to the card. So I just removed the backing on the foam adhesive, stuck it down onto my card front, and then I also off camera added foam adhesive to the back side of my sentiment, and I'll just finish this card by adding it to the lower left corner of my card front, and I'll hold up to the camera here so you can get a good look. I love how bold and vibrant all the colors are. The flowers have so much depth thanks to those layering stencils, and I think they pair really nicely with the bright splashy background. That's something fun and unexpected, I think, with these florals, and we just finished it up very nicely with that beautiful sentiment from the Happy Smiles stamp set. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.